there are some names we do know, and I think these people are definitely in big trouble at this point. 3 days after joining the Trump campaign, George Papadopoulos sent an email to 7 campaign officials with the subject line, "Meeting with Russian leadership including Putin." In April of 2016, he emailed Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski about Putin wanting to host the Trump team when the time is right, and asked Corey and another campaign advisor, Sam Clovis, about setting up the meeting in May of 2016. Papadopoulos met with Professor in April of 2016, where the professor confirmed the Russians did indeed have all the Clinton emails. Think about that. When we think about Trump begging the Russians to find all these emails in July, he knew they had them at that point.
That's right.
And he said he shared that the information with a high-ranking. He shared that information with a high-ranking campaign official and his senior policy advisor the following day. This was 6 weeks before the Trump Jr. was approached. Who are the high-ranking officials Papadopoulos shared this with? There's a very good chance here, considering the earliness of the Trump campaign. It could be current Attorney General Jeff Sessions was the individual that he shared this with. We do know for a fact, the fact that Corey Lewandowski and Sam Clovis are now actually named as knowing about all this, they're in trouble.
And I'm sure that neither of them would have talked to Trump Jr. and Kushner and the rest of them if Kushner isn't indeed the higher ranking official. But if it is Sessions, that would all make a lot of sense too. And people forget, where did Carter Page come from, who eventually did go over and meet with Russians? And if you remember the dossier, talking about the certain intelligence services of other allies of ours hearing about top campaign officials from the Trump campaign meeting with various Putin friends and allies and others. Well, yeah. So we know Carter Page went over there. Carter Page, remember, started off as a Sessions guy. You know who else did, by the way? Stephen Miller, a little self-hating, guess sort of Jewish, but sort of Nazi, if you can say that in the same sentence, who's worked for Trump since he came over from Sessions. So, it's again, when you get to this high level, it's pretty hard to believe at this point. Then you have to remember that Sessions under oath said he had no contacts with the Russians. Clearly, he committed perjury. I don't think I'm taking a big risk in saying that here. And so, who do they go after? Who gets flipped next? What happens? We're lucky we've got this sort of Eric Schneiderman set up in New York, and we're talking about these money laundering things with Paul Manafort and a lot of them that, and these meetings in Trump Tower, as well as many of these investment banks, are located in New York, as well as some of the real estate groups that Trump worked with, Bayrock and others, where money was laundered through, so that the New York AG has the ability to prosecute this, and Trump, of course, cannot pardon himself from those crimes. Interesting.
Well, and another note here in the guilty plea that was released, there's a footnote in there about George Papadopoulos' plea, which is actually this could be the smoking gun. The footnote describes 2 top Trump campaign officials, doesn't name them, but talks about them, reacting to Papadopoulos' coordinating of high-level Russian meetings. They forwarded Papadopoulos' aforementioned email to another campaign official where they needed to make clear Trump would not be the one sent to Russia. The response was, "Let's discuss. It should be someone low-level so as to not send any signal." If they knowingly sent a low-level person instead of Trump, this is collusion. And they know it. And the fact that, what do we take from the fact that there's a lot of names that aren't mentioned? Do you think that there are conversations going on right now with certain individuals and their lawyers about?
I'm about 2 million% sure of it.
Okay.
Well, look, from prosecutors, former prosecutors I know I've talked to, and those who I've read what they have to say, and I think have usually been pretty smart about these things. This is like a mob investigation. This is almost like a criminal operation, and you're talking about you need to sort of break away various parts of that operation, shake them loose, and frighten them, so that they'll end up turning on the key figures who you want to put away. And so you do it in waves because, you see Manafort and Gates, and you see this deal with Papadopoulos, and that is no coincidence that was all released today because Papadopoulos, of course, again, was arrested 2 to 3 months ago, and it wasn't released then. This was very purposely put out there today. It didn't have to be. but it was to go along with these other two things. And many would say, and many people have said, who are, and I'm not saying that in a Trump way, many prosecutors, former prosecutors I've seen and talked to, have said that this is very clearly a signal to the other people in Trump's orbit, which is jump off the ship now if you want to have a chance. Not to mention Trump, if you would even think about firing Mueller, that all of this is already in motion, and it can get a lot worse. Because if you think about that June meeting, I mean, I don't think for a second Trump gives a damn about Kushner, but he may care about his son, and his son's knee deep in this stuff. So yeah, I mean, again, like all this still has the ability to shock because we like to believe we're living in a democratic republic and that elections are honest. You know, they're fairy tales we were told as kids, but at the same time, we knew most of this, right? I mean, like we didn't know 100% for sure, but little, pieces of information. The big slush fund that Manafort had, that the Ukrainians were investigating, and other sort of similar things to this had been, sort of sneaking out and coming out. I don't know. I really have to suspect that Kushner, especially with all his various dealings and let's set up a back channel and all of that, is thinking about loyalty to family right now.
Well, and you mentioned his son-in-law as well. He clearly cares deeply for Kushner, and I think that, especially in conjunction with Ivanka, and I think that clearly there's an issue there. I'll get back to the firing question in a second, but let's go to the main story we've been anticipating all weekend long, which was the indictment against Paul Manafort. As we talk about Papadopoulos and the squealer, because he's the squealer. You always also in these conspiracies have someone who is so corrupt to the core, it actually leads you to ask the question of how in the hell did you not get arrested years ago? And that is Paul Manafort to a T. This is not just a Trump campaign indictment. This is years of money laundering, questionable behavior, wire transfers. There is a lot of to unpack here with Manafort itself. He is in big trouble because these charges go well beyond Trump and to the fact that he's just a disgusting piece of slime.
Well, he is a piece of slime, quite clearly. It raises a lot of other questions. One of them would be, remember, this guy was sort of a Brahmin of the Russian, maybe the Russian one too, but of the Republican establishment. Right. I mean, that firm, Black, Manafort, and Stone, and the Stone in there is Roger Stone, by the way, Mr. Talk to WikiLeaks and all the other things and the threats he's issued, and he's knee deep in this stuff too.
Exactly.
Has been since Watergate. So this is the corrupt Republican establishment, the one that was supposed to come in and save the Trump campaign, the one that's supposed to be, you just sort of shake your head and say, is there any, has this entire party not just been, does it need to just be burnt to the ground and something needs to restart a center-right party because they're so utterly corrupt? Because this was the guy that was going to save Trump when they brought him in, you may remember, after Lewandowski and whatever. Instead, he probably just brought in better connections to Putin. And here's the key about him that leads to another story that we've been talking about, which is I don't know if you talked about it in your show, perhaps you may have seen where there was that one nonprofit, reminds you, a C3 that had $17.9 million put in there by one donor to try to keep Merrick Garland off the court and allow Neil Gorsuch to ascend to where he currently is. Well, you do have to ask yourself those questions because apparently that, from this indictment, this is what Manafort has been doing for years. He's been laundering Russian money. He sort of, it seems like he maybe had pioneered this through American nonprofits. So then all sorts of foreign money could find its way into our election system because more and more as these guys have gone after the IRS, and that makes you wonder, is that just based on pure ideology or was there a corrupt campaign component to that? The IRS has not been able to do the kinds of investigations of C3s when they have Tea Party groups. They've been called evil and investigated and threatened with their jobs. How many of these C3s have been taking in God knows how much money in Russian money and finding a way to launder it through, LLCs and other sort of places so that it can be spent on behalf of Republican candidates? How much has this been spent directly by these C3s saying they're educating people, quote unquote, which they're allowed to do under that law? However, numerous of them, I remember Karl Rove being one of them in the past, stepped way over that line of what a C3 is allowed to do. And of course, nothing was ever done about it. So, it makes you wonder well beyond just the Trump campaign. Is there a reason they circled the wagon with Mitch McConnell over the summer, refusing to come out with a joint statement? Because God knows how much money. Mitch McConnell is all about money from anywhere, anytime that could help his cause into the American system. He's taken those issues to court. It just does make you wonder how much Russian money these guys know about. Especially with some of the stuff the Russians did on the House races too that we know about, that they were involved in those.